The scenes, the emotions pouring out at the side of the courtroom in Bowling Green, Kentucky during our breaking news coverage earlier on this Friday. The guilty verdicts for Steve Lawson, longtime former Nelson County Detective John Snow there, emotional outside the courtroom, feeling a moment of relief, hugging people. He was there from the very beginning in the investigation, finally seeing the first round of justice. Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us on this WHAS 11 Plus special. I'm Doug Proffitt as we bring you more on the Crystal Rogers case. Trial number 1 is now over. A jury finding Steve Lawson guilty for his role in the Crystal Rogers murder disappearance. It's a 10-year-old unsolved mystery in Bardstown. The jury today finding Lawson guilty for conspiracy to commit the murder of Crystal Rogers and tampering with evidence in the case. After 4 days of testimony, the jury believed Lawson helped others plot her murder, and he admitted to helping move her car on the day she disappeared there from the Bluegrass Parkway. The jury recommending a sentence of 17 years in prison. We now want to go to Bowling Green, where our Shane McAllister is outside the courtroom now. It's been a few hours now since the verdict, Shay. Of course, that jury taking just 2 hours and 23 minutes. So you watched that scene unfold as we were all talking about the verdict, the family members and friends of Crystal Rogers coming out of that courtroom crying.
Right, Doug, and even in the courtroom, I mean, as soon as the judge stood up and started reading the verdict, the very first thing he said was on the count of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty. That's when the heads fell into laps. That's when we started hearing some of the sobs, incredibly emotional moments, because that was the bigger charge and that was the question mark. He admitted to tampering with physical evidence. He admitted to moving the car. We were expecting that guilty verdict there, but that conspiracy was a big question mark, especially because just a few hours earlier, the judge had offered up an alternative. He told the jurors, if you aren't able to convict him on conspiracy to commit murder, you might be able to convict him on facilitation, and facilitation will be a 5-year penalty, not a 20-year penalty. So a much different story had that been the case. Certainly a great deal of relief in the courtroom, and then a lot of emotions, and it just got more and more emotional. I'm going to bring in my colleague, Isaiah Kim Martinez, now also in the courtroom for the sentencing phase. So when Tori came up, I wasn't expecting that. We didn't know who they would call, but they did call Crystal Rogers' daughter, Tori, to give her take on what the last 10 years have been like without her mom.
And Shay, as you know, Tori Rogers is getting married here very, very soon, and that was brought up in the courtroom. Shane Young, the prosecutor, he says, you have a big event coming up, and she told in front of the jury, as the jury sort of weighs the sentencing, my mom will not be able to see me get married. And that was something you could tell on the jurors' faces. That had an impact. I actually was speaking with some members of the family beforehand, and they said, yeah, Tori's the person. She's going to go up there at 21 years old and speak about the impact this has had the last 10 years. Read you some more of her quote. She says, Crystal, she's talking about her mother, won't get to see me get married or see my kids someday. She says we've had to go through all of our milestones without our mother. And this was key, kind of looking toward the next trial. I know we're going to get into this a bit. She said, quote, I still think we'll find her. Not the way we want to, but we will. So again, very heavy emotions in that courtroom, certainly. And obviously the jury said, listen, 17 years, served concurrently, so all at one time, is what they believe is appropriate, although we know the judge will have the final call in August 6th. That's when the final sentencing will be happening.
So that sentencing recommendation was in the hands of the jury. It was up to them not only to decide guilty or not guilty, but also to decide how much time to recommend. They could have recommended as little as 10 years, as many as 25 years. They landed somewhere in the middle with 17. Before they recommended that sentence, they actually heard from Steve Lawson's mom, who said, do what's right, but you're going to have to live with this. Almost saying, you're going to have to live with knowing that you're putting a man in prison for however long you decide. And very interesting, Steve's mom told the jurors, I have incredible sympathy for Sherry Ballard. I feel so bad for her. And before I knew my son was involved, I imagined, it was hard to imagine who could do something like this, who would do something like this, what kind of person would hurt Crystal Rogers. So before she knew that her son, Steve Lawson, was part of this case, she was well aware of the case. cheering on the family and finding justice.
She was. She said she would do the same thing if she was in Barbara Coulter's, her name, Steve Lawson's mother, if she was in Sherry Ballard's position. She said, I look at my son and I question him because I didn't raise him to do anything like this. So, I mean, she was honest, right? She didn't believe what her son did was correct, but again, she asked for leniency. Ultimately, though, the jury going on the upper end of this, not quite 20 or 25, but still 17 years is a long time.
Somewhere right in the middle.
Yeah.
So 15 jurors heard this case start to finish. Ultimately, only 12 jurors were able to deliberate. That is because 3 of them were excused as alternates. They were chosen randomly. They didn't know until the very last minute before they went into the deliberation room who that would be. Once those 3 names were drawn, the judge told them, you're free now. Go as you please. If you'd like to talk to the media, you can do so. You don't have to. So as soon as they walked out the door, we ran downstairs. I asked all 3 of them if they would want to talk to us, and one gentleman said yes. Take a look. Can you just give me your read on the case? When you were going to be walking in, what were you going to say in deliberations?
I don't know. I didn't get that far.
Didn't even get to think about it?
No, not really.
Did you believe Mr. Lawson's story?
That wasn't really a question of the case.
Do you think he had anything to do with the planning of the murder of Crystal Rogers?
I don't know.
What about the car? Do you think he moved the car?
Yeah. Well, he helped.
He helped move the car?
Yeah.
But you're not sure if he was part of a larger conspiracy?
No, I'm not sure. I think only the jury can
Make that call?
make that call.
What about this case? Had you heard about it before?
No.
You had not heard a single thing?
No, I had. My wife had, but you know, I had never. I knew her name. You know, I've seen the billboard, but I didn't know about the case. I didn't know it was here.
You never heard anything? So you were truly hearing evidence for the very first time?
Yeah. I'm not big into, you know, the crime, true crime stuff. So.
And it sounds like you followed instructions because you really hadn't made up your mind.
No, I hadn't. You know, I thought I had. You know, I would think that I had, and then, yeah, I don't know.
Was there anything, any moment that might have changed your mind when you thought you knew something? You said you thought you might have made up your mind, but then something stood out and changed your mind.
Well, I mean, we went through the whole trial without knowing the instructions. You know, once we were read the instructions, you know, the way that the law reads kind of changes like what we're trying to decide. So, no, I didn't have a clear opinion one way or the other.
Are you interested to see what the jury decides?
Yeah, I'd be curious to see.
And will you be paying attention when Brooks Houck goes to trial next month?
Probably not.
This will be the end of your interest?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So interesting, you know, Isaiah, I have to say, I too wasn't sure where this would land all throughout,
Right.
every day. One day you'd think, okay, that the prosecution makes a good point there. Yeah, I see that. And then the defense would say something and it'd open up those questions. It'd be poking holes in the story. It'd be making you weigh, is there really the burden of proof? Is it really there? So I almost felt the same way as him.
Well, Nick Mudd talked about it yesterday, right? That lack of a smoking gun, right? And the juror you talked to, the alternate, didn't necessarily feel like he was one way or the other. I actually talked with one member of the family after closing arguments. I asked him, how do you feel? And he says, I'm a little nervous. So you get this sense that like no one really knew which way it was going to go until we ultimately heard it. And obviously, the jury has spoken, and we'll see sort of what happens in sentencing here. 2.5
hours to deliberate, Doug.
Unbelievable speed, even from the beginning of this. And Shay, your question to the juror about the judge's recommendations in the end, the instructions, very interesting. We want to talk about that with Nick Mudd. He has been following that because the juror admitted there that they sort of looked at the case differently after the judge gave the jury their instructions there this afternoon. Well, I want to ask you first about the 17 years. Could have been as high as 25. Is this a appropriate sentence in this case?
I think it is if the jury believes that he's guilty of what they found him guilty of. Certainly could have gave him 10, could have given him 25. They really split the baby, gave him right in the dead in the middle. Could have been based on his age, his level of involvement. You know, if they thought he was even more involved in it, gave him the 25. But certainly they did think, I think with that sentence, they believed there was a significant amount of involvement with Brooks Houck in committing this murder, or at least conspiring to plan it.
You early in our coverage, before today came, said that Steve Lawson, you believed, would take the stand. Yes. If you were his attorney, you would have put him on the stand.
Absolutely.
He did do that. He was the last witness to, the last person to testify today before they then went in to make their decision. Was that a smart decision in the end by this defense attorney?
I think that they did what they thought was in his best interest, and you know, everybody's a Monday morning quarterback looking back and say, well, we should have done this, should have done that.
But you called it yesterday.
I did, and you know, I think it was, I still would have done it. I don't think at that point, you know, they had put forward a pretty strong case against him, and so I do think that at that point, you got nothing to lose. You get on the stand, you hope the jury feels sorry for you, you maybe minimize your role in it, or, which something they really didn't hit on, which I was thinking about this last night, is hitting on the fact that, look, I didn't get involved in this till after she was dead. If that happened, then he should have walked out the door on the conspiracy to commit murder charge.
Okay, does the defense attorney in this case have a good argument for appeal?
Doug, I think he's got a strong argument for appeal, and this is why. Absolutely. You know, this case, he's had, you know, months to prepare, but not like everybody else. Darren Wolf and his co-counsel came late to this game, okay? This was already, I think they got one continuance, a short continuance, to this trial date here in May. There is 400,000 pages of discovery, over 200 hours of interviews. If you work nonstop for a year on a single case, I don't know if you'd be able to review it all. You have to review everything. As a lawyer, it's your job. It's what you get hired to do. You cannot adequately prepare for a case and prepare specifically for cross-examination on witnesses without going through it all. And you know, the biggest issue that I have is a lot of these people testified. They didn't know who was going to testify, all right? There could have been dozens of witnesses, so the prosecution got the benefit of being able to cherry pick out of that 400,000 pages what they want. And to think that the lawyer maybe didn't have enough time to get to those pages and no fault of their own.
Can you appeal a case, though, if a lawyer just doesn't have enough time, or doesn't there have to be some real problem in the way the case plays out in the courtroom to get a successful appeal?
Well, they both can be reasons for appeal. And you know, in this specific case, though, the lawyer has said, hey, I did not have enough time. Look at this mountain that I have to go through, and I've not had a chance to adequately prepare. And, you know, we don't know. There may be stuff later that's filed that says, look, I didn't get a chance to look through this specific witness, and I could have cross-examined on X, Y, and Z about this witness.
You thought early on, though, that this defense attorney was doing pretty well until midway during this during the trial. You said, this was the prosecution's day. This case has turned.
Right, right. And, you know, it doesn't matter how good of a lawyer you are. You can't make the facts up. The facts are the facts. The jury's going to judge the credibility of witnesses. But certainly we had that. I think it was the Wednesday we had, day 2 of trial. The prosecution had a very strong day, which it was witness after witness after witness that really tied Stephen Lawson to this crime.
You know Shane Shane Young, the prosecutor, very well. So if I'm the prosecutor, am I finding Steve Lawson wherever he is right now or pretty soon and saying, hey, you need to turn on these guys. You're getting ready to go to prison anyway. It's time to give us the goods on these two. We'll cut you. Can a deal be cut?
A deal can always be cut before final sentencing. However, here, I don't think that's going to happen. And the reason being is that Stephen Lawson has given so many different stories at this point, so many different statements to the grand jury, statements to the police, that he's got no credibility. And remember, the defense lawyers for Brooks Houck and Joseph Lawson, they've got to watch this. Doug, they will by next Wednesday, they will have official transcripts of this entire trial sitting in their lap.
Well, nobody is better prepared than Brian Butler, who is the former federal prosecutor, U.S. Attorney's Office right here in Louisville, now representing Brooks Houck, a big, powerful, expensive lawyer to hire, and the Houck family hired him. So going into June 24th, I mean, he should be the most prepared lawyer in the entire courtroom in this whole case, correct? I would say he will be and is. He's been on this case the entire time. You know, he's represented Brooks Houck the entire time. He has. I've talked to Brian personally. I know he has been working on this case night and day and going through this mountain of evidence. Okay, more from Nick in just a second. As we heard this just in the first trial of Crystal Rogers' murder case, 2 other men are accused in the crime, and next will be the trial for Brooks Houck and Steve Lawson's son, Joseph Lawson. Joseph Lawson is charged with the same 2 counts as his father, Steve, conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with evidence. We heard part of Joseph's alleged involvement in the case, his father, Steve, claiming that Joseph called him up and requested that he help him move Crystal's car there from the side of the Bluegrass Parkway on that 4th of July weekend nearly 10 years ago now. And in June, Brooks Houck is going to be tried with Joseph Lawson, as we've just telling you. Houck was Crystal Rogers' boyfriend at the time of her disappearance. He has long been named as the chief murder suspect in this case. The state is going to try and convince a jury that Houck is the main man behind Crystal's murder. He's also charged with tampering with evidence. Now we want to go back to Bowling Green and join Shay McAllister once again. You know, Shay, we heard a lot about both of these men in this trial. They weren't even on trial, but their names were coming up, and you actually counted the number of times that Nick Houck, the brother of Brooks, was also mentioned.
Yeah, by my count, 4 times. Every single day of this trial, Nick Houck's name came up some way or another. Toward the end of the trial, they were considering him one of the 4 suspects, despite the fact that he hasn't been arrested, he hasn't been charged with anything. But they were listing off suspects saying Steve Lawson, Joseph Lawson, Brooks Houck, and Nick Houck. So by the end of it, they were just counting him in with the rest of the guys here, even though he's not even been indicted in this case. And we know that for sure. Shane Young confirming on the record he has not been indicted. We don't know where he is. We don't know what he's doing. It'll be interesting to see if he's anywhere near this courthouse here in a couple of weeks when his brother is sitting in front of a jury. We do anticipate Brooks Houck's family will be here. They have not missed a hearing. His mom, his sister, his girlfriend, all 3 of them are always in the gallery right behind him when he appears in court. But it will be so interesting to hear some of the details that pertain specifically to Brooks Houck and to Joseph Lawson, because yes, they were mentioned over the last week, but they were really mentioned in connection to Steve. You talked to Brooks about this, you talked to Joey about that. He called you here, you called him there. To hear how those 2 are connected, Joseph and Brooks, is going to be very interesting. So I'll bring in my colleague here, Isaiah Kim Martinez, in the courtroom with me all of this week. I think that we do know a lot of the story here, you know, where it started, where people were throughout the night of July 3rd into July 4th. At least we know where the Lawsons were.
Sure.
It'll be brand new information to find out where Brooks Houck was and if they tell us what they think happened to Crystal.
And sort of hear, Shay, also their attorneys' explanations for some of the things we heard in this trial as well, right? That deleted phone call from July 8th between Steve and Brooks Houck. What will be the questioning as far as what was Brooks's alleged role in that, right? Because there's a different charge here. This whole time with this trial with Steve Lawson, the whole thing was, well, he didn't or is not charged with murder. We're not talking about how she was murdered or what role he had in specifically committing the act. With Brooks, it's a totally different charge. So this question of, we know that the whole question of a lack of evidence, right? Physical evidence, a murder weapon, a body, turns out with the jury that didn't ultimately really matter when it comes to convicting Steve Lawson, but with Brooks Houck, could that have an impact? Will that be significantly harder? And we also know with Joey Lawson, we heard a lot about some of his testimony or things that he's been heard to have said potentially in the past. Like, what was that one line from one of the witnesses saying they overheard Joey Lawson say, quote, "We could use a skid steer to bury her," talking about Crystal Rogers, and nobody would know. What's his answer for that? His attorney's answers for that. So it'll be very interesting, and it could be a trial that could last longer too. We actually heard prosecutor Shane Young, the judge was trying to figure out a date for sentencing, right, for Steve Lawson. They were like, hey, how about July 3rd? Shane Young's like, no, we'll still be here. So you put the time frame, right, June 24th, when this next trial starts, that's at least, what, 9 days? So it's going to be a longer trial, and we got a little hint of that today.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. We're certainly going to be getting more information on how they plan to prove a murder charge, because that is one thing that was not established in this case at all. It was established that Crystal's presumed dead, but not that she's presumed to be killed. That will be all new information and will be new to everyone who has been following this case. I'm looking forward to hearing some of those details if they have them.
Right, 100%. And you know that hearing Nick Houck, right? You get a sense that's not an accident, right? The fact, especially on the prosecutor's side, what else does Shane Young sort of have left here, right? Because you get this sense that he's not dropping these things right away. It's sort of been periodic. What more can we potentially see on their side?
Sure, there might be a bigger plan there, Doug, and we have just a couple of weeks to find out.
We do, and I want to pick up again with Nick Mudd before we wrap up our special here on WHAS 11+. Even at this moment, we don't know a motive. There are no remains discovered. There's never been a body of Crystal Rogers found. I ask you this a lot, but now you've seen the results on the Steve Lawson case as we go into the next trial. Do you need to have that kind of physical evidence to get a conviction on Brooks Houck?
You don't need it, but certainly it makes your case much more difficult. The benefit, though, to Joseph Lawson's attorneys, Robert Boyd and Kevin Coleman, both excellent attorneys, to Brooks Houck's lawyers, Brian Butler and Steve Shoring, they are getting the benefit, though, of going second and getting to see the hand of the prosecution. Maybe not the whole hand, but a good chunk of it. And you know, you have a leg up going second. You just do. Big leg up.
Looking back at some of the key moments from this week, do you think the recorded phone call that Steve Lawson had with his mother that was played to the jury, do you think that's what cooked his goose here?
You know, it could, but I think that was one of many things. It was, you know, if you didn't know what happened, why tell story after story after story? That changes. You know, it's one thing to tell a lie and be consistent through it. It's another to tell a lie, and then we got a different story. Then we got a phone call. Then we got, you know, his voice on a call saying something else. So, you know, I think there was certainly multiple things, but none of them helped him in that sense.
Let's talk about the testimony from this week spilling over into the next trial in a month from now. We heard about unindicted co-conspirators and all kinds of theories and people, names coming out of the blue that nobody had ever heard, going, whoa, what's this about? Right. Is that going to creep into the next trial?
It will. However, the defense lawyers in the next case have the benefit of having that testimony. And I tell you, Doug, what they're going to do, they're going to file motions to limit a lot of that testimony to say, hey, you know, this shouldn't be allowed because it's hearsay, it's speculation, it's stuff that shouldn't be allowed under the rules. It's much harder to react on the fly when you're in court than it is to hear the testimony, have it for the court under sworn testimony, and been able to research and file a motion why you should be able to exclude it.
Both of them are going to be tried at the same time. How does that work? Nick, are they both sitting there through the whole thing?
They are.
Do you zero in on Joseph Lawson first, then move to Brooks Houck? Is there an order that's important in this?
So generally, prosecution goes first, puts their case on first, but then, you know, sometimes attorneys flip a coin to see, or kind of make an agreement to say, you cross-examine first, then I cross-examine, you know. So, but in terms of the prosecution's case, there are varying strategies to say, you know, hey, one strategy may be they're together and to proceed that way the whole time. Another strategy is to kind of, hey, we're going to build a case against Houck first for the first 3 or 4 days, then we're going to switch to Joseph Lawson and put on all those witnesses and to kind of parse it out a little bit.
So unfortunately, the cameras are going to be banned from the courtroom again. This judge will stick with his order. We've all challenged it. The local stations here in Louisville and the Courier-Journal joined together, and we lost on that case, so that is set in motion. But what about that day? How quickly, when they start talking to Joseph Lawson, is he going to throw it all on Brooks Houck?
We don't know what the defense will be. You know, I know lawyers, the 2 lawyers that are on the case, they're both fine lawyers, and I've tried to put my ear to the ground to see what's going on. I think they got a strategy. They got a plan.
But don't you expect that to happen, that the focus is going to be, I mean, we're probably going to, Joseph Lawson may be on trial, but the focus is really going to be Nick Houck overshadowing the entire case.
Right, but, you know, I think the prosecution's going to stick to, his main focus will be Brooks Houck. The question is how Joseph Lawson fits in there. You know, will they try to tie him directly in, or will they say, you know, more of a kind of a side note to the case? And the question will be the defense. You know, how are they going to play it out? What are Brooks Houck's attorneys going to do? What's going to be their strategy? They're going to blame Joseph Lawson for certain things. Say, look, he's lying about things. He's just protecting himself. He would make anything up just to get out of this.
This is the biggest of the Bardstown mysteries that has captivated this area. There are several unsolved cases left, but this is the biggest. In the end, do you think the mystery is solved in Crystal Rogers? Are we going to get information that we can trust as being fact and truthful as to what happened to her?
I think that's up to the jury to decide, and that's decided.
But do you think it'll be revealed, is what I mean?
I think we're going to get a lot more than we've got. I mean, certainly, Doug, we were surprised by, day 2 of trial, we heard all these people we've never heard about, right? Testifying to the cases about, facts that were like, whoa, we've never heard of this at all. I think we're going to get a lot of that. I think we're going to see people come out of the woodwork we've never heard about. And certainly there is a reason why Shane Young indicted this case. Shane's an aggressive prosecutor. He's a good prosecutor. He's a smart prosecutor. He was Prosecutor of the Year, I think, several years ago. He doesn't indict cases he doesn't intend to win.
Well, before we leave you, I do want to give a quote from a Bardstown resident that we interviewed today. I think it sums up the 10 years and where we stand at this moment. He said, "This week has been quite interesting. I mean, things were popping up left, right, and crooked." And with that, we head to the next month of the trial, the 2 big ones coming up in the disappearance of Crystal Rogers. When the Commonwealth tries Brooks Houck for murder and Joseph Lawson for conspiracy, we're going to have daily coverage for you from the courtroom once again. Again, it's going to be held in Bowling Green, and you'll see it right here on WHAS 11+. We want to thank you very much for joining us. Good night.